The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on putting your ABM and sales programs into action. So with us today, we have Carol Mustachio, who is a senior consultant at Perkuto. We have Nipul Choksky, who is the VP of Product Marketing at Lattice Engines. And I'm Lindsay, a senior consultant at Perkuto, and I will be moderating the session today. So the webinar format that we're going to follow is we will do about a 45-minute presentation. Then we'll open up the floor for discussion and Q&A for the last 10 minutes. The session will also be recorded and will be emailed to everyone within the next day. We aim to send out the recording by end of day today, but it may be out tomorrow morning. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. It'll contain the link to the entire session. And if there's anyone on your team you feel would benefit from watching it, feel free to share the link with them. So just a few general housekeeping rules before we dive into today's presentation. So for the GoToWebinar navigation, so currently everyone is going to be muted. And then what we will do is during the discussion, we may, depending on time and the number of questions that are submitted throughout the process, I will unmute people, and then that way you can ask your question, and it can be a bit more of a conversation with Carol and Nipul about the topic. What you can do during the webinar is you can feel free to type your question into the chat box, and then what I will do at the end when we open up the floor for the Q&A section is I'll just go down the list in order that the questions were received. So diving into today's webinar, we're going to do a quick introduction on the topics we're going to cover. We're going to discuss getting buy-in for your ABM and sales programs, determining effective tactics to use, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper and get into some real-world examples. So, Carol, you should be able to present now.
Perfect. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. All right, so let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about ABM, account-based marketing, and sales programs. And I'm sure that most people that are on this call are probably sort of raring to implement ABM at their organization, or at least curious about what ABM has to offer. So in our presentation today, we'll really be speaking to a lot of these questions that are on this slide here. Where should you start? What technologies should you invest in? How to get buy-in, which is, I think, a tough thing for a lot of marketers to do. And then, how do you measure success, and what how can marketing effectively enable sales in an account-centric world? So these are all really important questions to ask yourself if you're thinking about implementing ABM and sales programs for your organization. So let's dive right in. I wanted to tackle buy-in first because, as I mentioned, it is one of the tougher steps on your ABM journey and really the most crucial. It's really, really important to get executive level sponsorship, not just from your marketing organization, but also from your sales team. If you don't have both departments really invested in ABM, you will have fallen flat before you've even started the ABM journey. So really important to get that buy-in from your executive level teams from both departments. And if you're sitting on the marketing side and you're sort of wondering like, how or when is a good time for me to really start suggesting a more ABM or more account-centric approach to some of the marketing and sales programs that we're running at our organization. A good indicator, just maybe a small red flag, is if your sales leadership at your organization is already starting to see sort of a downtrend or a slowing down in existing accounts. It's a good sign that you might be open to trying some new strategy like an account-centric strategy. So good time to maybe talk to your sales leadership about piloting an ABM program with these set targets and be able to show sort of viability of an account-centric initiative. At the end of the day, while you're getting buy-in, one of the most important things that I think is really important to set at the beginning is that company-wide people really understand that ABM isn't a quick fix. It's a strategy that requires a few months at the very least to really get up and rolling. So really important that both from an executive level and just a department across the company, they understand that it's an investment, and the results on the revenue might not be completely evident right at the start. And then obviously, and I think a lot of marketers here and salespeople understand, sales and marketing alignment is something we talk about all the time in marketing and sales, and especially important for ABM. And when you go to a more account-centric selling process, marketing is pretty much as important as sales is in that strategy. So really important to use shared knowledge to better target and plan any account-centric initiatives. And on the marketing side, we sort of have to have a really good understanding about what the goals of the ABM and sales programs entail to really ensure that we are sharing a very common message across our two teams. So really making sure we're aligned internally and providing a really seamless customer experience for the customers and prospects. One of the most important ways in which you can do that is to do your target account selection process together as a marketing and sales team. And I think Nipul can provide some examples of how you guys can do that as a sort of combined organization. Can I forward the slide over for you?
Yeah, yes, please. Absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Nipul Choksi. I run product marketing here at Lattice. And sorry, I'm not looking at the camera. One of the key opportunities early on in any ABM initiative to drive alignment between marketing and sales is during account selection. Now, traditionally, you guys, if you're familiar, the way sales reps will typically pick an account for a target account is going to be based on either kind of their own prior experience or the relationships that they have within the accounts themselves. They'll start to introduce facts and work with marketing on that, typically looking at things like industry, employees, revenue size, and geographies where the accounts are based. And so that's a good starting point. What we've seen, however, is best-in-class companies being able to leverage more data points. If you could just forward the slide, please, Carol. More data points beyond just kind of these standard bread and butter firmographics data that if you're lucky enough to have, you can kind of leverage. But on top of that, what our customers are doing is being able to leverage thousands of other signals about each of their target accounts to really get a more expansive view and a more accurate view of who their target accounts are. And so you can look at not just things like revenue, industry, and employee size, as well as who you've sold into in the past, but you can also look at things like what kind of complementary or competitive technologies they've actually got installed behind the firewall. What kind of online presence do they have? What kind of intent are they expressing? Are they actively searching for solutions out on the internet? What kind of growth trends, are they exhibiting? Is it the case that, because you might typically sell to companies that exhibit high growth, and so you want to kind of be able to capture all of those signals. And so, this is a great opportunity for marketing to kind of come to the table with this data and drive very much a fact-based process for driving selection of your target accounts. If you can go to the next slide, please. And next slide. And so what typically what our customers will do is not just leverage this data to kind of do the account selection. What they'll also do is take advantage of the predictive analytics to identify which companies are most likely to buy. And so, that you may be familiar with predictive account scoring, predictive lead scoring. The idea is that you can use those scoring capabilities to identify which accounts on your target list most closely resemble your existing customers. The higher the score, the closer the match. And again, this serves as a great way to align with sales, not only on which target accounts you're going to be going after, but also what's the priority or the order in which you're going to go after these accounts. Next slide, please. Now, once you've actually scored your target accounts, again, doing this in conjunction with sales, and then at Lattice, we do ABM ourselves. And so I just want to kind of illustrate this with an example. What we've done is kind of used our own software to identify what our target accounts are, number one. Number two, scored those target accounts into tiers. So what we've got is effectively kind of like a top tier of 100 accounts that we've handed out to our field reps. And these are kind of like the creme de la creme, where the reps are going to be, doing a lot of in-depth research around the account. Marketing is going to provide support just in terms of content and whatnot from a support standpoint. The idea here is, once you've identified these become kind of like the accounts that the field reps will, proactively prospect into. Below that, we've got kind of our B tier of accounts. There's about 500 of them, where we'll still do personalization, but what we'll do is we'll do it more at the segment level. So we'll look at things like what kind of complementary technologies do they have. So most of our customers typically are Marketo customers or Eloqua customers or Salesforce customers. And so what we'll do is we'll use that information to personalize the email communications, to personalize some of the programs that we put together around webinars. We're starting to do more with ads as well as web personalization. At the same time, our SDR team is proactively researching and calling into these accounts, in terms of kind of follow-up on this tier of accounts. And then lastly, we have about 3,500 accounts kind of at the bottom tier, where we'll focus on them, but we'll focus on them in a less personal way, right? So we'll still do personalization, but it'll be done at the persona level. We also sometimes will combine that with industry-based segmentation to do some measure of personalization. But the idea is, kind of the level of effort and focus that sales and marketing puts on these is relatively lower than the A and B accounts. More often than not, typically our inbound leads will be most often from kind of this tier, and those are the ones, kind of our inbound programs are really geared towards capturing leads from this particular tier. So that's an example of how, in order to really drive alignment between sales and marketing, you can leverage analytics and data to kind of get on the same page with sales in terms of who you're going to tackle and add to your target account list, as well as how you're going to go about doing it. Okay?
Awesome, thanks. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about a few effective tactics for driving a successful ABM and sales programs in your organization. And the first one is around data review and cleanup. So kind of tacking on to what Nipola just talked about, it's really important that you're identifying any missing or dirty data in your instance, running cleanup and data management, because data is going to be crucial to actually do that, ideal customer profiling and ABM tiers. So oftentimes a lot of organizations will leverage partners to do data cleanup, data management before launch, and then use other applications like analytics and like Lattice Engines to actually be able to do some of that customer profiling to get those other stats. So that's really one of the first things that you want to tackle when you're looking at ABM, is really focused on the data and making sure that what you have in the instance looks good. Everybody has a dirty data problem. I don't think anybody on this call will say that they don't. So good to really just understand what point your data is at and where you might have holes, and good to use data enrichment partners to be able to do that, and then partners such as Lattice Engines to help with that profiling and the tiers for your ABM strategy. Another important tactic is to assign responsibilities. So because this is a cross-department initiative, is really important to sort of determine which components are handled or owned by which departments in your organization, and that the proper time and resources are allocated to those things. And establishing those responsibilities at the onset of the project is also really important, so that everybody sort of knows which pieces they're responsible for, and you know, that nothing is dropped. So really important as well to when you're working cross-departmentally across sales and marketing. In terms of ABM, another big thing is making sure that you define those key metrics that you're actually going to be using to show that you have run a successful ABM and sales program. And again, we need to be super collaborative about what those key metrics will be for your organization. Having those documented again at the onset of the project so that you can show that ROI and revenue from the get-go, or the change before and after you've implemented these programs, is going to be important, so that again, marketing and sales are aligned in what metrics they're going to be measured on and what is a success for your ABM and sales strategies. And then obviously evaluating. So no programs you run for the first time are going to be perfect. You need to review, revise, see which parts of your ABM strategy or tactics were most effective. There may be additional factors or new information, new metrics that will kind of float up to the surface that you'll want to start focusing on for future initiatives that you plan to do. And again, as I mentioned at the start, it's really important to note that, you know, ABM initiatives take a little bit longer to show ROI, so it's really important that you let those programs run for a longer period of time to really understand where their influence will be on the sales pipeline. And now I know Nipul's got a lot of real-world examples that he can kind of dive into to show how some of these tactics can be applied. I am going to ask that Lindsay forward the presentation over to him really quickly.
Awesome, thank you. So while I show my screen here, so one of the really cool parts about my job as a product marketer here at Lattice is I get to the great opportunity to, number one, play around with a lot of cool toys, just in terms of new capabilities and products. You know, here at Lattice, we are leveraging a variety of different platforms to run our own account-based marketing program. At the same time, I have the good fortune of being able to talk to you know, some of the world-class leaders when it comes to marketing, companies like Intel, Dell, CDW, et cetera, and really kind of learn how they're doing it. And so what I want to do for the rest of the presentation here is really walk you guys through a few real-world examples. You know, once you've gotten your buy-in, once you've gotten alignment with sales and figured out what target accounts you want to go after, and kind of prioritize how you're going to tackle those target accounts, you know, what are the kinds of campaigns that you can run? And so what I'm going to do is walk you through a few examples of those. Now, in order to actually run these campaigns, you know, the examples that I'm going to draw on are ones that we've done as well as our customers have done, leveraging predictive analytics and data. You know, in case you weren't aware, predictive platforms, what, you know, kind of a key benefit is that they will help you to identify what are the key attributes that make up a good target account. Right. So when we first talked about who your ideal target account or who needs to go on your target account list, you know, typically most companies will start with, you know, who have I sold to in the past? Let me look at the industry, employee size, revenue. Predictive platforms help you to go beyond that. So you can look at, again, things like technologies that are being used behind the firewall. You know, what kind of website rankings do they have? You know, what kind of growth trends? Are they hiring tremendously? Did they just raise a new round of funding? So the idea is that you can leverage all of these attributes as part of the campaigns, because ultimately what these predictive platforms will do is not just help you to identify, you know, to such a level of detail as to who your ideal target account is, but it'll make these attributes available to you in your ad targeting systems and word personalization systems, in your marketing automation systems, as well as your CRM systems, so that you can in fact run hyper-targeted campaigns, such as the ones that I'm going to walk through just now. Okay, and so here what I've done is I've listed out a few examples of the types of campaigns that you can run against your target accounts. And again, the idea here is I've drawn from examples where customers have, started to kind of like, it's almost like, as Carol was implying, when it comes to doing the ABM, you want to have kind of a crawl, walk, run methodology. And some of these campaigns here that I'll walk through are effectively kind of the crawl stage, if you will, crawl and walk stage, that'll help you get those early wins so that you can get additional buy-in for adopting a account-based marketing and sales strategy throughout the organization. So let's dive into kind of the first example here. So one of our customers, they're a security software provider. They asked that we not kind of name them because of just kind of the types of campaigns that they're running. What they're doing is they're using the data that Lattice provides to identify their target accounts that actually have competing solutions installed. So now, just as a caveat, I've actually changed the screenshot a little bit to protect the innocent, as it were, and protect confidentiality. But the idea is that what we're doing for them is we're identifying which target accounts actually have competing solutions installed. And what they've done is within Marketo, they've actually used that data to basically put their target accounts into very specific nurture tracks, right? So for example, if a particular target account has Cisco installed, what they'll do is they'll put them into a specific nurture stream where all they'll talk about is kind of the benefits and set up the buying criteria in such a way that enables them to look favorable against Cisco. And then they'll do that for all of the different competitors. Ultimately, what they were able to do was, because they were able to tailor the message, very specifically towards kind of the buying concerns that, kind of these target accounts had, they were able to see over a 2x response rate. So they were running different webinar programs for each of their different competitors. And they did kind of an A/B test, and they found that, when they actually applied this targeted messaging for the competitive takeout program, they saw 2x higher response rates, so 2x higher signups for their webinar programs. Ultimately, after running the program for a few quarters, they found that they were able to drive at least a 25% increase in pipeline from these target accounts. So substantial improvements based on, kind of just a little bit of data that the predictive platform was able to provide to them. And then just a little bit of, kind of creative rejiggering of the content that their product marketing folks already had in order to generate, targeted content for these different nurture tracks. So that's a simple example of how you can, get started with your account-based marketing and sales initiative in a really targeted way so that you can start seeing results relatively quickly. Another example here is a company called HootSuite. I'm sure you all are familiar with that. And so as part of their account-based marketing program, one of the things that they're doing is they're actually looking at selling into their existing customer base. At the same time, they also have a target accounts of net new prospects. And so what Lattice is doing is it's identifying for HootSuite specific productivity suites, right? So if they've got Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox, as you can see from the screenshot here, Lattice kind of identifies whether a particular target account is a user of one of those services. Now, HootSuite one of their key differentiators is they've got integrations into a variety of different, online services as well as productivity suites. And so they want to be able to talk up that integration that they have with all of these different services. So Lattice is identifying for them specific target accounts that have each of these services, and for kind of target accounts that have Microsoft OneDrive, for example, the HootSuite folks are tailoring their emails, talking about the integrations and leading with the value prop around how HootSuite integrates with Microsoft OneDrive and the benefits that a particular customer may have. What they're also doing on top of that, beyond just doing email targeting, is they're also planning on doing ad targeting, where basically what they're looking to do is create different ad copy, and basically through LinkedIn as well as other ad program providers, ad targeting providers, to kind of like execute on ads that are very, very targeted and very personalized. Ultimately, the benefit that they're looking to achieve here is obviously to, kind of improve on the ROI on their digital spend ultimately. Okay, so this is just, again, another example. We started with really quick, campaign that you can put together where you can identify companies that have competing solutions, and then you can quickly move on to say, okay, what are kind of complementary platforms do these target accounts have? And so you can run very targeted programs against them. Another campaign that we internally use, as well as a variety of other customers will use, we call it account engagement triggers. And the whole idea here is, when you're doing lead-based marketing, typically you're looking to basically send over a MQL over to sales. So a lead, if it meets a particular engagement threshold, it gets designated an MQL, and it gets sent over to sales for follow-up, right? Simple. Now, when it comes to account-based marketing and sales, one of the key things here, you're still selling to people, but you're selling to buying committees. And what sales really wants is not just to know that one particular buyer in that committee has engaged in your target account, but what they want to know is what's the level of engagement across that entire buying committee. How are the key contacts within their target accounts actually engaging with you? And so we've got, internally ourselves, kind of, we have a account-based engagement score that we're able to use using predictive analytics. And once that engagement score goes above a certain level, you can kind of, an alert gets sent to sales saying, okay, this particular target account has achieved a certain threshold, a certain level of engagement, and you should probably follow up, right? And so, another way to kind of look at this, instead of an MQL, it's almost like a MQA, a marketing qualified account. And so this is, again, another example of how you can, really quickly put something into place to start executing on your ABM campaigns. The fourth example that I just want to walk through real quick is all around identifying cross-sell candidates. So we have a lot of customers like CDW, Dell, EMC, right, where a good chunk of their revenue is based on basically selling into their install base. And so, again, what they'll do is they'll leverage the predictive analytics and the data to look at their existing customer list and say, okay, where are my opportunities for expanding my relationships with these existing customers? And so what they'll then do is, once they have that list, they'll execute a series of marketing and sales programs in order to actually, in order to capture those expansion opportunities. And the last example that I want to walk through here is really, direct mail. As I'm sure, it's no surprise to anyone, direct mail is definitely making a comeback. It is kind of a key tactic that, a lot of folks have found value in when it comes to executing an ABM program, but it's also a very expensive tactic. And so what you want to do is you really want to focus your efforts on those accounts that are most likely to convert, specifically most likely to convert, and maybe even kind of down a certain down a certain stage in the buyer's journey, right? And so here a great example. So the example here is from Cisco OpenDNS, but we have a variety of other customers, kind of doing this as well, where what they'll do is they'll use a predictive solution to identify who their highest value accounts are, so kind of their A targets. Then for their A targets, they'll kind of see, okay, which ones are actually out there expressing intent. Are they actually searching for security solutions in OpenDNS's case? We also have other customers that instead of using intent data, what they'll do is they'll kind of use the account-based engagement signals that I just talked about earlier. So if it's an A account where multiple contacts from the buying committee have actually engaged with my own programs, that's a trigger for me to know that I can include them in a high value, very expensive campaign like a direct mail campaign. And the idea here, again, in OpenDNS, what they did was they basically, for these accounts that were in market, they added them to a direct mail campaign, and there was a lot of work that they put into place, in terms of generating a very cool kind of tchotchke that they sent out to the chief security officers for the target account companies. The software they were selling, enabled them to create very custom visualizations of network security, and so they were able to kind of create that visualization and leverage that as a follow-up item in the direct mail campaign. So the idea here again is you have the ability to kind of take your highest value targets, really figure out which ones are in market, and only focus your efforts on those, right? And so again, it gives you a bigger bang for your buck when it comes to getting success out of these sorts of high value campaigns. And so those are just 5 examples. There's a ton of more examples that we can cover, but I just wanted to give you kind of a high level overview of the types of ways in which, once you've gotten buy-in into ABM, how do you get started? What are the campaigns you can start to running to start seeing value quickly so that you can continue to generate that buy-in, get more and more of the organization on board, and really then roll out account-based marketing and sales on a wide basis. And so, at Lattice, if anyone here is interested, we run kind of a free trial program where within 24 hours, if you provide us with a list of customers and leads, we can enable you to kind of get a sense of, what is the DNA of your highest converting leads and accounts. And that's something we can turn around for you within 24 hours. So in case you guys are interested, there's the URL. There's the URL right there. And so with that, I believe we're on the questions part.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for all that information. So we're going to get to the questions portion now. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask, please feel free to submit them either through the questions panel or in the chat panel. So actually, we have our first question from Catherine. So she was wondering if there is a minimum or a maximum database size needed for the free trial.
Oh, so that's for me. Yes. Yeah. So typically, we'll, in terms of database size, typically if you have, if you're selling into kind of like the S side of the SMB as well as the enterprise, there's kind of a varying range of databases. And so we're happy to kind of look at your specific case and kind of get back to you.
All right. So another question that we had that was submitted a little bit earlier on in the presentation was, is there a point where you decide that ABM isn't worth it? So for example, like, is there a situation where ABM may not be a fit for someone? So that can be either Carol or Nicole, or both.
I think one of the important things, or one of the things that I think some businesses run into is they think that, going towards an account-based strategy or account-centric strategy means like everything, all of the initiatives and the tactics in their organization have to be completely overhauled. Doesn't necessarily mean that you got to do that. I would say it's tough right now because it's obviously account-based marketing is new in the organization to say when it's not a right fit for you. I would say if you are not sure if it's a tactic that's going to work for your specific organization, then you probably would want to pilot it to see what the results would look like. And I would just caution that you want to definitely give it time to really run before you make that decision. And then, yeah, that's what I would say in terms of account-based.
So I do have a little bit more expansive perspective there, and I kind of go back to this slide that I was showing earlier. We've got customers that are taking, it might not, account-based marketing in the traditional sense of the word is basically kind of like what you would do for the A accounts here, right? Where, you would peel off out of your target market a handful of accounts that you would go after, and you would employ, kind of manual research. I used to work at Siebel, and, part of my stint there, I was a product manager where I was responsible for helping to do financial services, target account marketing. And so my job, I had like 3 accounts that I was responsible for, and I would work with, the sales rep whose job was it to close those 3 accounts. And I would create kind of microsites and research that was very, very tailored towards those, right? And so in that sense of the word, if you're putting in that much work, you can only really focus on account-based marketing to a really small population size. However, as everyone's aware, there are a lot of innovations out there, particularly in terms of the availability of data, in terms of the personalization options you have at scale with regards to ad targeting, with regards to some of the automation that's available to SDRs that enable you to take those same strategies and apply them to a broader base of accounts. So we've got companies, for example, that are actually going after the S of SMB. Now, internally, they don't necessarily call it account-based marketing, but what they are doing is they are applying what they call an account-first approach, where for the S in the SMB, they're going to look at all of the target accounts, and they're going to use, kind of predictive analytics and scoring to identify which accounts to go after first, and the data from predictive marketing systems to basically say, okay, for, kind of my A tier, mom and pop shops that I'm going after, what are the, kind of signals that I need to look at. So one of our customers that I'm specifically referring to, they're a financial services payments processor. And so as they're looking to expand into the S side of the SMB, they buy a lot of lists, and they'll use Lattice to score those lists so that they get a sense of which accounts to go after first. And then Lattice will also, for each account that they go after, append data, right, about that account. So one of the things that they'll look at is number of web pages on the website. So Lattice tells them for each of their accounts, how many web pages do they have on their website? And according to their predictive model, if that number of pages is above a certain threshold, they know that this particular company, is pretty sophisticated when it comes to doing online e-commerce. because they've got a certain number of products that they're selling. And so their SDRs, when they do their outreach, will tailor their talking points and their script appropriately, where they'll talk about the benefits of their more, kind of higher end products relative to other companies that might not be as sophisticated in their target market. So in my mind, when it comes to there's different tiers of account-based marketing, and depending on the size of the market, you may employ more automation or less automation to kind of address it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we have another question from Nicholas, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to unmute Nicholas. Hi, Nicholas.
Hi.
Hi. All right, so you wanted a little bit more information on the intent-triggered campaigns.
Yes, so if you could just maybe expand just a little bit more on that and kind of identify opportunity and like how you can kind of go about saying, oh, I have an opportunity to give an intent trigger campaign in this instance.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So, what one of our customers actually is kind of doing this where, intent signals, there's kind of two types, right? One type is intent that's kind of what are people doing out on the web, are they searching on certain terms? Are they clicking on certain ads, right? And you can use those signals to get a sense of, oh, okay, is this particular prospect actually, looking for a solution? Because it's a great indicator for what stage of the buying cycle that they're actually in, right? It might be, because more often than not, when you're going after your target accounts, right, more often than not, you're calling an account that's like the right company. It's just the wrong time, right? And intent data is one of the signals that helps you to identify whether it's the right time. And so you can use that data as well as data around engagement on your own web properties, with your own kind of marketing programs to really figure out, okay, do I actually want to include them into, certain programs, right? So the Cisco OpenDNS example that I talked about, right, where they basically said for their target accounts that were A accounts, I want to know which ones are actually down a certain buying stage. So they looked at intent signals as well as engagement data to then trigger and put that account into a direct mail campaign. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so another question that we had was how often should you update or evaluate your target account lists?
Do you want me to take that one?
We can get answers.
Yeah, we could both. I think, if you've got a tiered approach, I've seen 3 months, I've seen every 6 months, especially for the A and B accounts. And to some extent, A is really so targeted that your sales team is probably going to be looking at them probably almost every day. But in terms of like an account review, I've seen, every quarter they're going back and looking at who's in each of the accounts. Are they still using the right metrics to target things? I'm not sure if that's your experience as well, Nipul, with the frequency, but that's what I've seen with some of our customers.
Yeah, I mean, in general, it again depends on kind of what tier you are talking about. On average, across kind of that pyramid of 4,000 some odd accounts in our target list, on average, our turnover is probably like once a quarter, where we'll do kind of a refresh. Obviously, as sales reps make progress on their higher tiers, we want to give them more time, so the turnover there is going to be less than kind of the turnover that you see at the other tiers, the bottom tiers.
And then the other question that we received was, what is the best way to get alignment around the target accounts?
Okay. I can take a crack, Carol, and then definitely would love your thoughts here as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of alignment, as we kind of walked through, earlier, you know, one of the most effective ways to get that alignment is definitely around, kind of definitely through the use of data, right? Oftentimes, like I said earlier, right, when sales will pick a target account list, it's typically going to be based on their relationships as well as their experience. And then on top of that, you'll incorporate things like industry, employee size, and revenue. And so just kind of starting with that data-driven approach, I think goes a long way towards building that alignment. Carol, I don't know if that's been similar to your experience there.
Yeah, I think oftentimes I've found that a lot of salespeople are a little bit afraid of data. I don't know if you've had similar. They're like, oh, I don't need all this information. Where did this information come from? But I think one of the nice things about having data partners and predictive is that you can give them more insight into their accounts that they wouldn't have had before. And that's sort of one offering on the marketing side that's like, hey, like here's some things that you maybe didn't know about your accounts, and we're giving to you so that you can use and leverage that. And on the sales side, I think it's important for marketing to sort of understand that they obviously have the relationship with the customer, and an account-centric approach that is one of the key factors. And I think on the marketing side, we're so used to automation, data, it's all about the data, and we don't give them sort of their ability to talk about the influence that they have on a relationship level, like who at the account is important for them to target, what are the buying centers over there, who do we have a good relationship, who do we need to build a better relationship with. And if you're taking that approach, when we're talking about alignment between marketing and sales, I think it's important on the marketing side to identify and acknowledge that that information is also very important when you're going towards a more account-centric approach. And sometimes the thing that we miss when we're really focused on crunching numbers. I know I've done that. So on my side.
That's a really good point. And I can't emphasize enough, right? You want to make it as you're getting alignment and buy-in from sales. You don't want to scare people off, right? You don't want to. We've seen, kind of one of our key learnings as a company, as we've invested in terms of building solutions for sales and marketing. Leveraging predictive and data, is you want to make things as simple and easy to grok as possible, right? So you don't want to scare people off with just showing tons and tons and tons of data. So as marketers, to Carol's point, I think there's definitely merit to kind of approaching it from the perspective of, hey, here's some additional insights that you may not have known about. But then on top of that, make sure that you're listening to sales, and kind of really hearing some of the experience and including some of the experiential, kind of attributes and data that they're bringing to bear to the conversation as well.
Perfect. I don't see any other questions coming in. If anybody else has any other questions, we've addressed the ones that we've received so far. So I'll just wait a few more seconds and see if anybody else has anything they'd like to know a bit more about. Again, we just want to thank everybody for attending the webinar today. And just a reminder too that we'll be sending out a link to the recording. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can feel free to reach out to Carol or Nicole. Their email addresses are on the screen right now. I don't see any other questions coming in, so we will wrap this up for today. And thanks everybody again for joining us. And hopefully we will be able to chat with everyone again soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.